The next example, we're going to talk about aircraft flight paths. This is basically the method of committing aircraft into play. Now, in each commitment phase, you have two parts. The commitment of ground units, which we've shown in the previous video, and commitment of aircraft. So aircraft are done separately after all the ground units are committed, in the order of initiative winner first, and then the opposing player. So in this case, let's say that the U.S. has the initiative and has a P-38 Lightning in his or her hand with a pilot. Now, to commit that aircraft into play, basically you're going to bring it into what we call a flight path, which is any straight line path over either the front line map or the rear line. So, for example, you may want to attack this artillery. That would be a legal straight line flight path, is to fly over the rear line of the enemy. Now, when the committed aircraft comes into play, you'll notice that the aircraft unit card does not have any line information on it. So, for example, turns of flight is shown instead of front line or rear line because these aircraft can fly anywhere. In this case, turns of flight 3 means that this P-38J will be in the air for 3 turns. Each of those 3 turns, you'll commit a new flight path. So, in the commitment phase, again, that's where you're declaring where these aircraft are going to fly over the map. And now, you don't have to declare what you're maybe targeting. That doesn't happen until the combat phase. The first step of this aircraft movement here is to declare where they're going to fly. So in this case, I see as the U.S. player a couple of potential targets. One is this Panzer IV on this row A. Another potential target is to take out this building with bombs. So, for example, this infantry inside, maybe I don't like them too much and I want to drop some bombs. I can do that too. So I don't have to declare what I'm doing. I just have to declare where I'm going to fly. So, to do that, as a U.S. player, I place this card along the outside edge of the map where the unit will execute its flight path. That flight path has to be straight, cannot be diagonal across the map in any other way. And it can be in any straight path. So, for example, I could fly over column 4, or row A, or row B, or row C, or again, the rear line. So I have a bunch of options. Now, ground units are already in play, committed. We're already done with that. Aircraft now get committed. Here is the P-38's flight path. But let's say as the German player, now I'm done with aircraft for the U.S., the German player happens to have a Messerschmitt in his hand with a Luftwaffe pilot. He will also commit to the same flight path, and that's okay. Units can crisscross their flight paths, and in this case you may have a little dogfight because of it. So even though the U.S. player has the initiative, that's maybe not necessarily a great thing for the commitment of aircraft flight paths. So keep that in mind, because the German player can kind of react to that and bring his own aircraft along the same flight path and potentially dogfight. So, now that those two aircraft are committed, we're done with aircraft commitment. And what happens is in the combat phase, that flight path will be executed. Aircraft will fly over the map, attack its target, and eventually come back around for another pass, potentially up to the end of its turns of flight. So, again, turns of flight 3 means he's only here for 3 turns. Next commitment phase, you would do the same thing, potentially committing to another flight path, and you would count down your turns of flight at the end using this turns of flight counter. So 3, 2, 1 in this case. Now, that's basically it for commitment of aircraft. So again, in a summary, aircraft come into play in the commitment phase to a flight path. That flight path is executed in the combat phase, where any attacks happen. And basically in the next turn's movement phase, when units on the ground are moving around, we consider these aircraft who have flown over the map, we consider them to be flying around for another pass. And then the next commitment phase, you bring them into another straight line path and potentially have another attack. So that's how aircraft work. And at the end of the turns of flight of that aircraft, you count down to what would be 0 at the end of the turn, you would actually remove the aircraft and put it underneath your reserve stack.